music and meditation, to me in my life, are very, very intertwined. The lightness or upliftment I experience, or lightness I guess you would say, is I always try and do at least a short meditation before performing, especially if it's, say, my concert or my offering. I think music ultimately should be an offering from the heart and from the soul. So I think trying your best to silence the mind and be in a soulful, prayerful consciousness with a few minutes of meditation before offering what you're going to offer is very, very important. Yeah, to try and bring the audience into that higher space. I think that's one of the goals. That's really one of the great offerings that a musician can do. Very great singer, songwriter, and he's considered basically like the Bob Dylan or Neil Young of Russia. His name is Boris Grebenshchikov, who also became a student of Sri Chinmoy, I believe, in 2006, and received the name Purushottama. He's a very special soul, very, very beautiful person.
Свернулись в кольцо, как я узнаю тебя, когда прожекторы прямо в лицо. Around the sun, I have heard the wise men say that all of them are one. A sweet silence waiting when all my thoughts are done, when my eyes have learned to see, I'll see that all is one. We may be far apart. Oh, Sri Chinmoy, forever in my heart.
what I do is try and sit in a place of silence for a few minutes and try and allow it to come to me, and sometimes just put my hands on the keyboard, and I guess you would kind of call it kind of automatic writing. Also, the same thing applies when I'm doing arrangements of Sri Chinmoy's songs, which I am just really inspired about working with, doing arrangements of the Guru's songs, because they may appear to be only simple, almost folk-like melodies, but there's this real inner quality, there's this real magic in those songs. So very often they can turn into very beautiful, very elaborate arrangements. For example, one of my friends has the spiritual name Vijayanati. He is a bassist in the Salzburg Symphony in Austria, and also has become very adept at doing incredible orchestral arrangements of Sri Chinmoy songs, which actually he's invited me to use for live performances. Yeah, I think it's important to be a clear channel. That's the main thing too. Don't let the mind get in the way. Sometimes you have to use a certain amount of the intellect to get those notes on paper. Well, I have been blessed, and a lot of doors that have opened up to work with a lot of musical greats. I would say the first major door that opened was with the great guitarist John McLaughlin. And it was through my dear musical brother Narda Michael Walden that he's the one that opened up that door, because at the end of 1974, I think it was December 1974, he was in the famous Electric Ladyland Studios in New York, recording what would be later dubbed as his favorite album, as John McLaughlin's favorite album, called Visions of the Emerald Beyond. And so at the time I was in Miami visiting a musician friend who was even considering moving down there. I had been a student of Sri Chinmoy for about the past 6 months, but still was a little unsettled. I said, okay, what am I going to do for life? Well, Miami's a nice place. Maybe I'll move down here and play with the musicians down here. Suddenly, a phone call came from Narda saying, hey, we're in the studio. Mahavishnu needs a saxophone player. How soon can you be here? And it was that one of them OMG moments. I said, did I really hear this? Like, the Mahavishnu John McLaughlin needs me, like right away. So it reminds me of like one of those Miles Davis stories where Miles' manager calls this bass player and says, by the way, Miles, heard you, he wants you to be in the band. And the bassist was on the West Coast. And he says, all right, I'll book a flight, and I'll be there. I should be there in about 4 or 5 days. And suddenly, there was silence on the other phone. Then Miles gets on the phone and says, what you gonna do, walk? So it was like that, like get here and now. And so that was the first major door that opened up. Also quite unexpectedly in January, I get a call from the man himself where John McLaughlin says, well, Russell, do you have a passport? Yes. He said, okay, rehearsals start next week and you'll be ready to go on tour in about 3 weeks. And it was another one of those magical moments. From there, other doors opened up. I became friends with another great, Carlos Santana, and I was blessed to tour with him in the fall of 1978. And he did something really unique. He actually took Sri Chinmoy's songs, and with my help, we put together some really fun jazz fusion arrangements of those songs and took it on the road. And so we did an incredible tour in Europe, 6-week non-stop tour, playing both original songs and Sri Chinmoy songs, and you can actually see some of those videos on YouTube. Through Narda, when he actually broke through to be Grammy-winning record producer, he invited me to be on recordings with so many great people. First of all, being Whitney Houston, I was blessed to play on her first 2 albums, including her major hit called How Will I Know, and also on her second album. Fast forwarding to 2008, he asked me to join him in the house band for Sting's Concerts for the Rainforest, which I've done every 2 years ever since then. At the last one, which was 2 years ago, Narda said during the rehearsals, he said, Premik, can you give me that motion gun sound, because Bruce is going to be here and he's going to do Santa Claus is Coming to Town. They always talk about those 15 minutes of fame. Well, I had that probably about that 25 seconds of fame where I got to solo with the boss at when he was doing Santa Claus Coming to Town at Carnegie Hall. So much fun. And there's a very funky cell phone video of that on YouTube because legally you can't video anything at Carnegie Hall except for archival purposes, but someone snuck in a fun little video of that so you can see it. Sometimes what you have to do, you have to kind of lasso the audience and grab them and try and bring them to that higher place. As the concert goes on, sort of a wave comes over the audience, and suddenly they stop their noise, and suddenly we become like one big family. So that's also what I try and achieve when I'm playing for a class or a more intimate gathering. When you're in a large gathering, that's a little more difficult. I was blessed to have many, many experiences being at Sri Chinmoy's peace concerts, which they took place around the world, and most of the ones I experienced were in the New York area, and of course New York area is a noisy world, but yet in these large settings the audience was very much in rapt attention. So not everyone might have really gotten it, but yeah, the degree to which they were well behaved is almost like nothing I've seen. There is a sort of a magic aura that came over the audience, and in his early years I think Sri Chinmoy used to do primarily lecturing, but then he found that the medium of music really conveyed the message that was able to go beyond the mind into the heart and soul. One thing that John McLaughlin was known for in the Mahavishnu organ, he did really what no performer ever did. He asked the whole audience for a few moments of silence. And if they were too noisy, he wouldn't play. He would just stand there, meditating with his guitar, until the audience finally got the message, we better quiet down. And then it was like an explosion of sound. When that band started, there's nothing like it. Till this day, there's nothing like it. With Santana, he was a little more subtle about it, but what he would do is very sweet. When we did the tour together, we would do our little duo meditation. The two of us would be in his dressing room, and you usually would sing the first line of this sacred invocation. And we'd do our own little meditation, because he didn't want to try and push that on because his audience was pretty rowdy. While I was on tour with Santana, he told me about a time that he was visited by Eric Clapton. And Eric said, Carlos, what's this meditation stuff that you're into? And so I said, well, you want to have the experience? So they sat and meditated together, and Eric really, really liked it. Really, really enjoyed. He said, I forget exactly how he put it. He said, that picture, he was talking about Sri Chinmoy's Transcendental, that picture has some serious power. Through that, I've met and had the chance to back up so many greats. Not the least of which is the boss, Bruce Springsteen. I met Bruce a couple of times in the past because I was dear friends with his greatest of all saxmen, Mokshagun Clarence Clemons. You'll notice that I use the name Mokshagun because that was a spiritual name given to him by Sri Chinmoy, because if I may share a sweet little story, I met Mokshagun at the studio in Asbury Park, and he was working on his solo album produced by Narada. And during the recording, Narada called a break, and we all sat in a circle. And what Narada would do, he would take a poetry book of Sri Chinmoy's, and he would pass it around and says, everyone read a poem out of this book. So we would recite the poem out loud. And at the end of the session, Mokshagun Clarence Clemons was so moved that he wrote something on a piece of paper and gave it to me. He says, could you please give this to the Guru? Okay, so when I had the opportunity, I did. And it turns out that piece of paper was a request where he said, Guru, I know you have many disciples, I'm sure you have many problems. May I become one of your problems? And so it was the sweetest thing that he asked to be a disciple of Sri Chinmoy. my friendship with Mokshagun, Clarence Clemons, was very, very special, very, very sweet. And one day I was visiting him at the house, and he said, why don't you give me a sax lesson? I said, well, I'll do what I can. And so we just had a great session together. And then since that time, when he would be meeting with big shots or something, and I would happen to be with him, he said, oh, this is Premik, he's my saxophone teacher. And they go, oh, yeah, and then they was like, oh, you know, like, you're Clarence's sax teacher? Meanwhile, it's not really true. We were just friends, and we maybe had one or two little musical sessions together, because it's something that, not to be sounding too esoteric, I would say it's been something that came to me long ago, you could say past life or something, because even as a little one, my grandmother was a really devout Catholic. She had a lovely, lovely painting, a very famous painting of the Christ on her, on one of the walls of her bedroom. Sometimes I would just go in there as like a 5 or 7 year old, and I would just sit and I would just look at this picture and look at it and look at it and look at it, and then the mind would just, you know, as a little one, you don't have too much mental conniptions going on, so I would just have these really inner experiences. That even continued through high school, you know, when the whole hippie movement hit, and, you know, the whole movement was also deep into Eastern mysticism. Indian music became the thing, became hip to listen to that in whatever way I could. I didn't have a teacher, but practicing meditation in whatever way I could. Then fast forward several years later, when Narada, my dear friend Narada again, introduced me to Sri Chinmoy's writings, which I didn't quite connect with, but then he finally convinced me to come to New York to see Sri Chinmoy in person. That's when the magic happened. The evening started so beautifully. There was John McLaughlin introduced the night. He was all dressed in this beautiful white suit and read from a beautiful book called God the Supreme Musician. Read some quotes from that. Then I saw there was this, you know, man in Indian robes kind of walking around. I said, oh, that must be the Guru. And so then, very, very slowly, Sri Chinmoy took the stage and did not say a word, just folded his hands and meditated, and that's when I got blasted. It's really something you just cannot put into words. It was like love at first sight multiplied by 10 trillion. You know, it's just like deep, 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 powerful experience. I find that daily meditation is essential, and you'll find that all over Sri Chinmoy's writings. In fact, really, I think the writings of any true spiritual masters will say that, you know, that it really needs to be your daily diet. You know, he says we always focus on, usually, unless we're fasting or something, feeding the body several times a day. He said, you know, how many people really will feed their spirit, feed their soul on a daily basis? So I feel very, very fortunate having a teacher, because, you know, for example, if you hear, say you're starting out on piano, you want to be a great pianist, and you hear these greats, well, how do they become great? Well, sure, tremendous hard work, tremendous practice, but you can say almost in every single case, they had several awesome teachers. I always tell my flute and saxophone students, yeah, you can buy your little books from your music store, but you can be sure that your progress will be much, much slower. So if you have a one-on-one relationship with a real teacher, you will sail much faster. Spiritual master's consciousness is infinite. So it is possible to have a one-on-one relationship even if he has thousands of followers all over the world. Even when he was here on earth, I felt that oneness. Maybe not at first. You know, I maybe felt, oh, I'm just part of a crowd. You know, he's not talking to me. He's not paying attention to me. Then I finally realized that, wait a minute, I am having these experiences. He is paying attention. He is aware of my, you know, needs, imperfections, and all that, and we're working on this together. You know, one can be a great student of an ascended master like Aurobindo or Ramakrishna, Christ, Buddha, any of them, even though some of them left the planet 1,000, 2,000 years ago. It's all a matter of your own devotion, establishing your interconnection, but it takes work. You always have to continue working on that connection. The name Premik if you were to look at a Bengali English dictionary, the one-word translation is lover. We all have our own special inner quality. So the idea is that once you have this name, it represents your inmost essence, your highest qualities. It's that the name Premik, and the translation below, which he gave, it says, the God lover who loves the supreme, soulfully and unconditionally. And so I feel it's a real deep blessing to have received that.